Hello, I'm Ellen Bintz, coming today from my hometown, Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Brentwood in the UK, just outside London. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
Today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's February 5th, 2025.
Now, this week, we turn our attention to the strongest economy and most populous country in Europe, and that is Germany, of course, whose people go to the polls on February the 23rd, just a couple of weeks away, in what is a much earlier than expected election following the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-party coalition government last November. Following last year's year of elections, you may recall, this year sees general elections in several South American nations, in Canada, very important one there, Liechtenstein and Norway, as well as anywhere else. I'm not terribly sure. I think those are the main ones. Presidential elections are also scheduled in various countries, including Belarus, Romania, and Ireland. This is only the fourth snap election in post-war Germany's history, occurring well ahead of what the original scheduled date for the next election was this September. Scholz lost a vote of confidence in December, prompting what some observers say may be the most critical election the country has faced in the modern era. And in this episode, we'll seek to understand what is actually happening in Germany and where our prayers and intentions may be especially needed right now.
Yeah, so what is the current political landscape in Germany? Germany's political landscape has recently seen significant shifts in party support and a fragmented voter base. The leading parties are the longstanding coalition maker, Christian Democratic Union, Christian Social Union Party, who are currently leading in polls with 31% support. The Alternative for Germany Party, or AfD, a far-right party that's currently in second place with a staggering 20% support, a level of support unheard of since the time of the Nazis. And Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party, which is currently polling at only 15%. And the Alliance 90, the Greens Party, currently showing 14% support among the electorate. Three other parties, BSW, a newly formed left-wing party, the Free Democratic Party, and the Left Party are currently polling at around the 5% threshold required for representation in the Bundestag, Germany's federal parliament. The collapse of the coalition led by Scholz led to a shift in voter support away from the governing parties, the SPD, Greens, and FDP, towards opposition parties like the CDU, CSU, and AfD.
Well, there seem to be four main issues concerning the electorate. Firstly, one that is very prominent in many countries around the world, immigration and refugees being a top concern. Secondly, the poor state of the economy. Following years of growth, the country now facing stagnation. There's also concern among voters for taxes, with the CDU-CSU coalition proposing lowering income and corporate taxes. And finally, retirement, as plans to encourage working beyond the retirement age have also been proposed, as elsewhere in other countries, sparking a debate for some among the electorate. Now, with no single party having close to an absolute majority in current polling, the election outcome is likely to lead to weeks of negotiations to form a workable coalition government. The CDU-CSU partnership appears best positioned to form a majority coalition, potentially needing support from either the Greens or the SPD. Concerns about immigration and the economy especially have driven support for the Eurosceptic AfD. This is the right-wing party, who have also received prominent support on the social media platform X from its highly influential owner, Elon Musk. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, Musk hosted a 74-minute live stream on X with the leader of the AfD, Alice Weidel, which attracted around 200,000 viewers. And in this session, he asserted, only AfD can save Germany, end of story, calling the party's proposals common sense. However, most commentators doubt that the AfD will be able to form a coalition in the next parliament, as all other parties, well, certainly all the other major parties, have ruled out cooperating with it. I think it's what they call a firewall, this agreement, not to align with far-right party. Ongoing discussions about potentially banning the AfD due to its classification as a confirmed right-wing extremist party are continuing in some states, while nationally the party's support varies, being strongest in some of the eastern states of Germany. There, the party won a state election in Thuringia last September, and the party has garnered wide support among the young, potentially broadening its support base in the long term. And this may be where a shift to right-leaning sentiments may gather momentum, especially if whatever government that's elected in February fails to deliver on its promises. Now, I actually heard yesterday, I was tuning in with listening to some correspondence from Germany, journalists. There does appear to be a potential, what they call a crack in the Christian Democrat Union, which is now talking in more hard-lying terms about the immigration issue, potentially signaling that they might at some point even be open to some sort of cooperation or alliance with the AfD. But that is purely journalists' viewpoint at the moment. I think the general view is that this so-called firewall policy, that the main parties won't align with the AfD, at least for this election, is what's most expected. But they do appear, the immigration issue is beginning to really certainly lead to a stronger rhetoric than has been heard from the likes of the CDU.
So what has triggered the election next month? It was triggered by disagreement in Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-party coalition government over economic policies, a declaration by the Constitutional Court that the coalition's budget practices were unlawful, and frequent public infighting among the main parties and targeting of Scholz's perceived ineffectiveness. The coalition had governed since 2021, but had become increasingly unpopular, with its three parties suffering heavy losses in regional elections last year. Scholz subsequently called for a vote of confidence, which he lost, precipitating the dissolution of parliament.
It's a difficult political structure for a lot of us. I think, particularly you and I, Alan, in our countries, there's essentially two parties, isn't there, dominance in parliament. In Germany, coalition has always been a strength, even if it's very boring. The fact that Scholz has been unable to hold this together and this sort of growing dissatisfaction with the coalition model is also interesting, I think. Quite hard to get head around when we talk about all these three parties in coalition.
It's so interesting. I do business in Germany, and I have friends in Germany, and I have heard them talk about the immigration problem. And Germany is very generous with their immigrants when they come in, and it is a strain. They're not used to welcoming people into their country. This is a little bit new to them, but they're hyper aware of the effects of World War II.
Yes.
On the perception of their country, on what they did. So they're struggling. There is this balance, but I chuckle when they say that the retirement age will rise or messing with that, because I don't think you want to mess with that. That they like their retirement and they look forward to it.
Yeah, they do. And I think especially countries in Europe, and France is the other really obvious example here, which has a traditionally very strong ethic towards supporting, more socialist, really, kind of mentality than perhaps US, UK. So why do many observers say this is a critical election? The upcoming election is considered critical for a number of reasons, coming as it does amid, as we've described, quite a fragmented political landscape, with the traditional parties losing ground, and especially with new parties, notably the AfD, gaining a lot of traction. Germany faces serious economic stagnation. It really is quite marked, really, over the last few years, how the fortunes, as it were, of Germany have turned around. And we were talking very briefly before we started recording around the effect of, or potential effect of tariffs. Germany is certainly one of those countries that has a huge positive balance of trade with the US at the moment. It's car manufacturing, for example. The number of, I think there's something like 30% of German cars get exported to the US. So yet another huge factor there, potentially, if the tariffs come in.
Well, it will personally affect our family business
Oh,
if the German tariffs go,
yes, of
if there are
course.
German
If you,
tariffs.
yeah, absolutely. My goodness.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
So with this real threat of economic stagnation continuing, it makes this election a referendum, essentially, on the country's economic future. Significant changes in key policy areas such as immigration, climate policy, international relations are expected, which could have very long-lasting impacts on European politics in general, given Germany's central role in the European Union, particularly. And furthermore, with no one party likely to win an outright majority, the election results will likely lead to complex coalition negotiations, potentially reshaping the country's governance structure, as we're saying, perhaps. In a sense, it's not necessarily this election. We don't know yet, but chances are this election this time round is not going to be dissimilar to previous ones in terms of a coalition of some sort coming into place. But there does seem to be a change happening, and 2 or 3 years down the line, who knows where we'll be. All of this is taking place against the backdrop of a newly inaugurated EU Commission and, as we mentioned, the new Trump administration in the US, potentially influencing Germany's role on the global stage. And together with the unprecedented rise of populist forces, the election is thus being seen as a pivotal moment that could redefine Germany's domestic and international course in the coming years. The fragmented political spectrum represents a stark move away from the traditional dominance of the CPD and CDU and may signal a period of political instability and uncertainty that would do little to settle nerves about the country's economic woes and the challenges facing flagship German companies such as Volkswagen and Siemens.
Mhm. So, where might we hone in with our intentions and prayers? As we've seen, significant challenges are facing Germany and its people. As this critical election approaches, and tying in with this year's Global Healing Responses theme of authenticity, which we spoke about last episode, we suggest especially holding intention for transparent, honest, and comprehensive debate by the competing parties, for accurate and representative reporting by the media, including a commitment to scrutinize political claims and highlight the implications of pursuing different courses of action, and for a widespread movement among all voters to stay mindful of the potential unreliability of claims made on social media. Let us will that this great nation will have wisdom in assessing the political choices it is making, and that the way forward will guarantee the freedoms, commitment to social care, and set the conditions for a thriving economy that have characterized Germany's model example for most of its recent history. Let us will, too, that those who fear the consequences of immigration will be moved in their voting choice by compassion for all and a balanced and informed view of the effects of migration.
Mm-hmm. So this week, as Germany's federal election approaches later this month, we suggest holding as our main intention, we will, that all voters in the forthcoming federal election in Germany will be moved to cast their vote in the interest of the greatest good for both themselves and their fellow citizens. Please join us in holding this.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Vince and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.